Okay, so you're going to be making your landscape tile, and this will be our final project for the year. You have air dry clay in your supply kit. You probably have more than you need because I gave you two pieces, but I think you're only going to need, maybe one and a little bit of the extra, but you'll kind of see how it goes for when you decide what you want to do. So what you want to think about is you're going to decide on a landscape to portray. You could do a cityscape too if you wanted to. And you need to have three parts. You need to have a foreground, which is kind of like what's happening in the beginning of your of your tile. You have the middle ground, which is kind of like the next thing behind it, and then you have their background, which would typically be like the sky or like really far away mountains or something like that. So the first thing, I'm doing a desert scene, so the first thing I wanted to do is divide up my space. So I drew a line for my foreground, and where you draw that line is going to give you how much room you have to work with. So I knew that my foreground was just going to be kind of this strip down here. And then I have my middle ground, which is kind of this like mountainous area that I've put in. And then my background will be the sky, these kind of like faraway mountains, some clouds, the sun. And then you can, use the different techniques that we've done before to create your landscape. So you just make sure that you're choosing something that has those availability of those three sections, because otherwise you're going to be missing, a big chunk of your work. So don't pick like the sun setting on an ocean, because that's not going to be enough. You only have like a foreground and a background. So I just am using a skewer stick for like doing my drawing. I have a loop tool that I can use for cutting. If you don't have a loop tool, which I don't think that you do, you can take a paper clip and just and keep one side a loop, and you can use that to carve out. So that's what I did here for like carving out my my clouds here, and you can kind of do that in some layers. Now you're going to paint this when you're done with either watercolors or acrylics or both, whatever you decide that you want to work in. So just kind of keep that in mind, that you don't want super rough edges, because you're going to have to be painting this, and that's going to be a little bit tricky. So I am smoothing my edges down just with a little bit of water on my finger, so I can kind of have like an easier time painting this. I am going to carve out my outline of my mountains. Okay, the cactus I just made, I just took a little clay and kind of pinched that to make the the cactus shape. And when you're gluing things down, when you're attaching things to your tile, you're just using a little bit of water. This is air dry clay, obviously, so we're not going to be firing it, but you still want to make sure that everything is really well attached. Otherwise, it could tend to fall off as you're painting it. So just a little water is fine. That'll like act like the glue. All right, so I have a cactus here. I'm going to put it next to like this cactus. And then I'm just using my skewer to kind of tap in some texture there. Now, something about the timeline for this. You probably need a day or two to make your tile. If you're going to not finish it in one sitting, you want to make sure that you wrap it up, because the clay will dry, because it's air dry clay. And then when you're done, it's going to take about a day, 24 to 48 hours to get really nice and dry completely. So you don't want to paint it when it's wet. That's going to be challenging for you, and it's not going to look very good. So just make sure that when you're doing this, that you kind of are aware of the timeline that you have, that you don't have, like, you don't want to wait till the day before it's due to get this done. So I'm going to put a little snake in here. Just roll the coil. So you could do outer space, where you have like a planet, and then you have mountains, and then you could have like space as the background. You could do a cityscape if you wanted to, where you could have like, cars and people in the foreground, and then you could have short buildings in the middle ground, and then you could have taller buildings in the background, or something like the George Washington Bridge or the Brooklyn Bridge. So, you could do that. You could do a garden scene, where maybe there's just like a house in the background. It doesn't have to be mountains. I just did that, just to kind of show it clearly. But as long as you have your area split up into 3 sections, where you have your foreground, the things that are closest to the viewer, the middle ground, kind of everything behind that area, and then your background typically is your sky, and then or anything that's up really, really high. So I'm going to let this dry, and then I will start painting my tile.